Living in Central Florida is a little bit different, yes. But a lot of the misconceptions that people have before they come here, we need to dispel. Things like what kind of wildlife and how often you encounter them, what kind of weather we have, places that we go to that nobody thinks about. Those are the kinds of things that make Central Florida unique, but there's so much misinformation out there that we really need to take a look at it and see what's true and what's not. And that's what we're going to do today. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we want to get into is weather. Everybody talks about Florida being sunshine all the time. You know, you get out there and it's always sunny or it's always humid and hot. Always is not a good way to describe Florida, and especially Central Florida. Central Florida has its climate changes just like other states do. We go from being hot and humid in the summertime to being cold for Florida in the wintertime and everything in between. So by September, October, November, we're starting to see temperatures drop from the 90s down to the 70s and sometimes in the 60s. Some years in February, we've had low temperatures during the day as low as 38 and overnight in the teens. We've actually had snow once or twice. And so for Central Florida, the idea that weather is pretty stagnant, it stays the same, it's always hot, always sunny. We have a lot of changes in the weather seasonally. And then, like, let's say, for example, during the summertime, we constantly get rainfall in the afternoons. So you will see clouds come in almost on the clock some years at around 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and you'll get torrential rain pours that will last 10, sometimes 15, 20 minutes, and then they're done. You can be out on the highway driving, and all of a sudden you hit this giant rainstorm that seems like you're going to have to pull over because you can't see the hood in front of you, and then within seconds you're in sunshine again. That's Central Florida. That's Florida, really, but that's especially Central Florida. And as far as the hot and the cold, it just depends. During the wintertime, you can pretty much figure that if it's 40 degrees in the morning when you wake up, and you want to take a jacket, take a light windbreaker because it's going to warm up by 10 o'clock. And during the summer, if it's, let's say it's 50 or 60 degrees early in the morning, maybe 70, and around 10 o'clock, you can pretty much figure it's going to be 85, getting close to 90 by noon. And so you have to kind of, go with that. You bundle up during the wintertime, but be ready to change into something a little bit, cooler. And then during the summertime, you're kind of doing the same thing. It's just a very odd way of dealing with weather, but that's our weather here in Central Florida. Okay, next up. Everybody thinks that Orlando is all Disney. Like everything is Disney, MGM, Universal, SeaWorld, all of that. But Orlando has a lot more to offer than that. There are neighborhoods. There are plenty of places to find housing. There are plenty of places to find condos, single-family homes, townhomes. We have a very vibrant community in Orlando. And when it comes to attractions, Orlando's not the only place that has attractions. And the attractions aren't always just Disney, MGM, Universal, and SeaWorld. We have all kinds of attractions. We have things that go above and beyond attractions. So we have museums. We have art exhibits. We have Jazz Fest. We have so many different things between Orlando, Tampa, Polk County, Polk County, like Lakeland and Winter Haven. There are so many places where you can go and find all kinds of different eclectic things to do that have nothing to do with going to a theme park. And so you want to make sure that you're not so focused on theme parks that you miss out on all of the other things that are out there. The next thing is cost of living and affordability. A lot of people are complaining about the cost of living here in Central Florida. They're complaining about prices that have shot up. They're complaining about home prices. They're complaining about insurance. But when you compare our market to other markets, Even here in Florida and outside of Florida, of course, the affordability is still there. You can find affordable housing. You can find affordable insurance. You can live affordably here if you, kind of pay attention. The affordability factor, when you compare it to other areas, whether it's New York, Chicago, Miami, Tallahassee, you're going to find that Central Florida is favorable when it comes to finding affordable living and when it comes to pricing, whether it's the price of food, whether it's the price of insurance, regardless, even gas prices. You're going to find that living in Central Florida, if you're coming from another state, especially if you're paying taxes, especially if you're paying personal income taxes as well as state taxes and everything else, you're going to find that Central Florida is really affordable compared to those things. Now, if you grew up in Florida, if you've been in Florida for a long time, yeah, you're going to complain because it wasn't what it was last year. It wasn't what it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago. Well, guess what? Nothing is what it was 20 years ago. That's not how life works. So if you're living here and if you've been here for a long time, or if you're a native like me and you've seen prices climb and you've seen things go up, you have to understand that those things happen. It's not always the best, but it's still cheaper than going someplace else and trying to find housing and trying to find affordability. Now, I'm not saying that we're the most affordable. Don't get me wrong. There are places in the South that are much more affordable. But given what we have here and the lifestyle that we have, I think it's a great trade-off. So let's look at the next one. Okay, so the next one is near and dear to my heart, and that is critters. I've got a video up here about critters and what you run into, but the misconception is everywhere you turn, you're going to see an alligator. That you have to take your life in your hands, just walking through a park or sitting out by a lake because alligators are everywhere. They're going to kill you. All of that. It's just not the way it is. We do have instances where gators or bears have encountered people and have mauled people, have killed people. I mean, it happens. Don't get me wrong. But it happens so infrequently. So whether it's shark bites, whether it's gators, whether it's black bear, we have all of those things here. But when you look at the population of Florida and the number of times that somebody encounters wildlife and ends up getting hurt, it's so few and far between. It's almost like saying you have a better chance of getting hit by a bus after you finish watching this video and walk down the street. That's just the reality of it. Now, there are things, and the video that I just told you about will help you, but there are things that you can do to keep you from running into problems. So if you know that, for alligators, let's just say, that their mating season is right around September-ish, then you know that maybe you need to pay attention when you walk to the edge of a lake and not let your dog just jump into the water by the hydrilla and not really pay attention to if there's a gator around, because that's their mating season. That's when they're most aggressive. If you see somebody feeding an alligator, call the Wildlife Commission and report them, because the gator doesn't know where the hand stops and the food starts. And so that presents a dangerous situation. Black bear, yes, we have black bear. They're mostly up in North Florida or north of Tampa. But for the most part, they tend to be very shy. They tend to not bother anything. And like most animals, they're either nocturnal or crepuscular. Nocturnal meaning that they don't really move around or do a whole lot until nightfall, and crepuscular meaning that they don't really become active until sometime in the early morning or the late evening. And so you know that during those two periods of time, certain animals are going to be more, they're going to be more active, they're going to be more prone to encounter humans. And you know that overnight, there may be animals that are more prone to encounter humans. To be honest with you, like when you go to a park and, maybe camp out, you have more problems with raccoons than you do with bears or alligators or anything else. And then as far as sharks and whatnot go, understanding their behavior is a huge part of understanding how to keep yourself safe. Knowing that splashing around, getting on a surfboard, looking like a seal is probably not going to be the best way to keep them from thinking, oh, dinner. Okay? And so these things are things that you need to be thinking about as you start thinking about moving to Florida, and understanding that, you know what, it doesn't happen all the time. And your chances of being in that position are few and far between. All right, so the next thing is this idea that Central Florida is just for retirees. That is the most cockamamie nonsense I think I've ever heard. Now, don't get me wrong. We have retirees. We have snowbirds that come down, and we have a lot of them. Don't get me wrong. But we have so many young couples and families, and we have, so many people of different walks of life, different ethnicities, different religions. You can't just say that everybody in Central Florida is a retiree. It just doesn't work that way. We have a very vibrant community here in Central Florida, and we have all kinds of people here, and we have everything from college students to professionals. Not all of them are retired. And so for Central Florida, a lot of the mythology around that comes from back in the 50s and 60s, where people were more prone to, kind of have that one-track mind of Florida is just for retirees, and that's not the case anymore. Now we have such a mix of people here. It's just become a really nice place to live. And I know for a fact, living in Winter Haven, where I live, I talk to everybody. I talk to people at the grocery store. I talk to people at the post office. I go into neighborhoods. I go into low-rent neighborhoods, high-rent neighborhoods, and I talk to pretty much everybody, and I've never had any issues with anyone. So the idea that Central Florida not only is just for retirees, but it's also unsafe is not true. There's crime in Central Florida, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, once you start to understand where everything is, you're going to know where those little spots of crime are, where they're the most prevalent, and you'll be able to stay away from there. But the rest of Central Florida can be very nice to live in, and so don't let that dissuade you. Our population here is just like any population anywhere else. There's good and there's bad. And so it's not just retirees, it's not all criminals, it's not all of the myths and the nonsense that you've heard. It's actually really nice. And you're going to find that once you get here, you'll find a place to fit in. You'll find people to fit in with. Okay, so if you're thinking about moving to Central Florida and you'd like to ask some questions from somebody who has lived here their whole lives, give me a call. My number and all of my contact information is in the description below. If you would like to set up a Zoom and have a little bit better discussion, just go to talkwithvince.com, and I'll be more than happy to sit down with you, do a Zoom meeting with you, and see what I can do to help you understand the lifestyle, some of the areas that are really good for you, and kind of where you can fit in. And also talk to you about home prices and the way that we do things here in Florida to get you into a home, all the steps involved, all the money's involved, all of that stuff. We can sit down and have a conversation about it. So anyways, hope you liked the video. Comment and let me know if you agree with or disagree with anything that I said, and I will see you on the next video.